Welcome to the Tao of Pizza, where we feature top logistics leaders, entrepreneurs, and supply chain innovators and share their inspiring stories with a holistic twist.
Mark Hiddleson here, host of the Tao of Pizza podcast, where I interview the logistics industry, top professionals in warehousing, logistics, and supply chain business with a holistic twist. This episode is brought to you by Specialized Storage Solutions. Now, listen, I've been in the logistics and storage industry for several decades, and I know I don't look that old, but it's true. We provide industry-leading warehouse storage solutions nationwide. So basically, if you have a warehouse that needs racks, shelving, carts, conveyors, or mezzanines, we help with the design, engineering, installation, inspections, and repairs to help clients optimize their logistics operations. You know, Matt, sometimes people don't even realize that we actually help with the permit acquisition services. We take a holistic,
Really?
Yeah, if you can imagine that. We take a holistic look at your entire business supply chain and help you continually improve your operation. So to learn more, visit specialracks.com or give us a call at 707-732-3892. I even give my personal email out to podcast listeners. So you can email me at markhiddleson@aol.com. So today we have Matt Burke. He started in the direct-to-consumer perishable fulfillment business 5 years ago, and he quickly scaled the business from 5 employees to 200 employees, shipping approximately 50,000 orders a week. Now they're looking to optimize regional carriers to deliver orders in less than 1 day to the end consumer. Matt is an exceptional warehousing and operations professional with specialized skills in helping direct-to-consumer businesses thrive in their fulfillment capacities and service. Matt, welcome to the Tao Pizza.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I love your background there. It kind of looks, I know it's not your building, but it kind of looks like your building with the bricks in the background.
You know, it kind of works. It's definitely not my building because this is more upright, but it gives a good background.
So I've been looking forward to this. I got to give a huge shout out to Murphy. I was thinking about before this interview. It's how did we I was thinking like, how did I meet the guest? And I was introduced to you by Chris Murphy. He's one of the most awesome third-party logistics guys, rock star, musician, friend, business colleague, and it's really cool. A lot of the people he's introduced me to are really cool people. So it's like you're one of them. So
He
you got to
does have
say
a
something
great.
about Murphy.
He's got a great collection of friends in the industry. He's always meeting people in between sets and drinks. You can always find him somewhere near the front of the show. Good guy to be connected with in the industry for sure.
Yeah, and he's just constantly always on the move, learning stuff. I mean, he and I, we started together in Warehouse Education and Research Council. Like, we're always bird dogging the latest thing. If it was RFID or like when you went with us, we were researching pick to light for so before, and I'm going to ask you something about that, but I want to ask you, how did you get into this business? It was kind of a unique business, and the third party warehousing or direct to consumer fulfillment. How did you get
So my logistics career started at Golden State Foods, actually. So I was a continuous improvement analyst there, measuring warehouse square footage, pick pack optimization, all that kind of fun stuff, just trying to get as much out of the buildings as possible. So that was kind of my background. I had the opportunity to come up and work with the Sierra Pacific Warehouse Group. And we had a customer gap open up in our Stockton campus. It was just 6 months or so after I kind of got going and got started. And we had a hole to fill, like a physical room opened up, and we didn't know what we were going to do with it. So we had a little program, a little direct consumer program going on down in Patterson, which is another facility that the Sierra Pacific Group manages, large building. And the direct consumer at that time was really small. It was one account called Daily Harvest. If anybody knows the direct consumer industry, they're one of the largest ones. Sierra Pacific actually shipped their very first box on the West Coast. Back then, the business didn't really mesh with the building that it was in. So we looked at the opportunity and said, okay, well, the Patterson Group doesn't need this. It's kind of in a weird location in the warehouse. Let's move it up to the Stockton campus and really try to turn this into a solid business model. Moved it up there. Lo and behold, just dumb Irish luck. Stockton is a really solid distribution center for the entire West Coast, not just for California, but for perishable and partial fulfillment. You can cover basically 70 million people in 48 hours or less, all the way from Seattle to Vegas, Phoenix, down to San Diego. Everything is 1 or 2 day ground, which is an extremely important cost metric for all the direct consumer brands. So we kind of got lucky. We had an opening in a location that was great. And then we quickly realized that as the business grew and scaled, and this was kind of in the Goldilocks era of the direct consumer, kind of right at the start, quickly realized that the Stockton labor market basically addressed all our needs. Very hardworking, very blue collar, got lucky with a couple of great employees that were just temps, all of a sudden turned into great supervisors. And from there, we just captured a couple of really great brands, went from 500 boxes a week to 2,500 boxes a week to 10,000, 20,000. All of a sudden the pandemic happened and we went to 50,000, like over like a long weekend. It was a pretty wild run.
Yeah. So to say a little bit about, 5 to 200 just seems like, it's two different, it's night and day. What were the early days like? Going from 5 to 200, there obviously had to be steps. What were those early days like? I remember showing up one time, it's like, wow, this parking lot's full. It used to be 2 cars here.
So direct consumer fulfillment follows internet marketing trends, right? So it moves closer to a SaaS offering than it does to like a standard CPG food model, right? So when the Instagram or Facebook ads hit, they hit very fast and they hit very hard, right? So you double in those early days when you kind of catch lightning in a bottle, you start to double very, very fast, right? You'll go to 100 to 200 to 500, and it just kind of starts to snowball. So during those beginning days where I was the 5th employee, I'm constantly taking customer calls, prospective customer calls, calling on potential customers, all while doing all the dry ice ad, shrink wrapping of the pallets and doing all that stuff. So I was the 5th warehouse person and basically only manager up on there on site. So you couldn't afford to not wear a bunch of hats, right? So in those early days, you're doing a bit of everything. You're the vacation backfill, right? I didn't know how to process labels, deplete the inventory, manage the schedule, do everything all at one time while being worried about top line revenue.
And most importantly,
all within a theoretical 10-hour.
You strategically planned out the racking projects, which
most importantly,
most important thing.
Our racking, thanks to you and Murphy on that original design of the rollers, it really ended up being the motor like behind those early days, right? Because all of a sudden you weren't picking off the floor, right? By no means were we Star Trek warehouse, right? There was nothing, no lasers, but it was just above prehistoric, but it was really efficient and it was really easy to add new people, which really allowed us to scale. It was a simple, repeatable model where you can take somebody in, get them started at 8 o'clock in the morning. By 9 o'clock, they can actually be picking on the line, helping contribute. That was an extremely valuable piece.
Oh, so when everything was organized, like, 3 high and 4 across, I forget what had it. It's different. Like if pallets were just spread out, you kind of had to know where everything was.
You had to know where everything was. It kind of operated like an Easter egg hunt. Those are never efficient, right? And then you all of a sudden have to have a PhD to try to pick at our location, right? There's not a whole lot of those running around trying to find hourly jobs. So when we built the model that was repeatable, anybody could come in and effectively start to work right away. It also helped us identify who is going to be a good performer or not, right? Because it became so simple you would know
You
in
got
the first.
standardized metrics that you go, look, you should be able to pull 600 cases an hour or whatever.
Yeah,
it is.
you'd be able to get going, get started. You would be able to see very, very quickly, is this person going to match up or not? Right. And it's, you don't want to waste either group's time through that process. So it allowed us to get everybody into the functioning model very fast, which allowed us to scale.
So you are, I love having you on here because you're an ideal client because you use us in the right way. Like you can.
Well, you always save 1,000 pallet positions for me at any
I
given
always
time.
keep
So I
at any
appreciate
time.
that.
So you do some things that are just smart business. Like you get, and I don't do this with all my clients, but like I give you ballparks because if you're planning a project or you have some new coming in or their volumes are going to go up. You like you're a good strategic partner is what I call it. So where did you learn that? Where did you learn that
Uh,
skill? Because it really is a skill to kind of use us. We can do drawings. We don't do a drawing every single time, but you can ask questions like how many pallet general, and then we narrow it down. And then when we need that stuff, you're like, okay, do a drawing for this. Cool.
Yes. So the start of that understanding come back from the continuous improvement background, right? Where you're constantly analyzing the costs and profits of all your buildings, right? So when you are managing a site or managing an operation, you have to have metrics boiled down to the most granular level, right? So for me, on a cold storage building, that's square footage. So you have to know how much your cost is, how much your revenue is per square foot, and how racking can change that, right? So if I have, we did constant examples of these where all of a sudden it would be a too high floor stack rack or too high floor stack, right? Where you got something that's not securable beyond that. Then all of a sudden you lose all that cubic height at the top. Well, the air on the top of the building costs just as much as the air on the bottom, right? So you have to maximize your total cubic square footage. In order to do that, right, you have to go in and you have to provide basically just multiple analysis for yourself in order to make sure that you're following it correctly. If you don't do that, you need to start. And if you do that, you can make sense of these racking projects very quickly. I mean, we went back and forth on a bunch of them that some of them made sense, some of them didn't. And it ultimately comes back to the ROI that you're actually trying to capture, right? If you're doing a bigger project, longer project with more capital, you can not string it out, but you're okay with a longer return, right? If it's a new building, you got to be expecting 10 to a 15-year ROI, right? If it's a short racky project and I want to make sure that I maximize the return, I'm trying to get 12 to 18 months, right? So it just comes back to your working capital and how fast you need to turn it. And if you don't know those answers, you shouldn't be investing in anything. You got to answer those questions first.
And you can find opportunities quicker in your business because you have, kind of the, a little bit of the background about ours. So, and you learned that when you were working for, what was the first company and who were some of their big clients? Was Golden?
So Golden State Foods, they own, a subsidiary of theirs is Quality Custom Distribution. That's actually where I started.
Okay.
And they do the distribution for Starbucks, Chipotle, Chick-fil-A, and a couple others. So one of my first projects was going in because a lot of people immediately think when they get a warehouse going that it's immediately full. And it primarily comes down to just understanding how the space in the warehouse actually works, right? So you have to look at everything. You can't look down only in a warehouse. You have to constantly look up to see where your opportunities are, right? So that is kind of where we went through. We did basically a warehouse optimization project for the whole QCD network. We went through all 13 facilities and mapped out where the opportunities were to add more pallets, which effectively adds more revenue. And that group was a long-term focused capital intense group, right? You're okay with a lower return because you're going to hold those assets for longer. So there's a little bit of a different mindset, but that same math can be applied basically in any model.
And they're a third-party warehouse, meaning I think a lot of people, and I try to bring it up on as many of the podcasts, is again, a lot of people that might listen don't know what third party is. Like, I remember I was surprised when I saw, all these cans of pineapples, and it's like, yeah, that's all the pineapples in the world, and they might put one label, all the different labels, and they're just bare cans, and they slap the labels as they go. And there's a lot of different things in business. I mean, even the empty cans have to be stored somewhere before they do the canning. The fruit has to be stored, and so all these things are in warehouses. Most people, um, I don't know. I wonder how many people don't realize you can outsource your warehousing. I mean, to me, that was one of the big ahas about getting in this business.
Mhm.
Like, wow, these, like, the clients you're working with, especially the direct to consumer, where they're selling and taking the orders and collecting the money is totally different from where the stuff is
Totally
getting
different.
shipped out.
It's really interesting because you obviously have smaller accounts, right? Mom and pops that do 1 to 50 pallets, right?
A
Local
month,
farmer selling,
a
local
month,
pallet that'll sell spinach and freeze it, like those kind of things, right?
right, right,
There's a
right, right.
lot of those accounts, but the largest fast food chain in the world, McDonald's, outsources almost all of its distribution, right?
Yeah,
And the reason why a group like that will do it is so they can focus on really what they want to do. I'm not going to speak for them, but I'm assuming it's to ensure that their customers get the best deal and the best deliverable that they can provide from their restaurants. That is not uh, that is not distribution,
right.
right? So if they're focusing on managing the trucks and maximizing the trailer cubic square footage, maybe somebody doesn't get the Big Mac the way that they should, right? And then
Yeah,
that's a lost sale. You can't boil the ocean, right? You can boil a pot.
right.
And if you try to do everything, you're going to be average at a lot, or you can get really, really good at a couple of things. Now, there's other groups that say distribution is absolutely a core business model of ours. Like Dutch Brothers Coffee does like almost all of it, right? So it just comes back to what do you really want to focus on.
Right.
So it's because a lot of big groups do it and a lot of big groups outsource it. So it doesn't feel like there's really a right or wrong answer, but in each individual opportunity, there can certainly be a wrong answer.
Well,
So
and
you
I
go out,
think
lease space, you can
it's
be upside
easier to
down very
scale
fast.
though, because somebody,
Oh
like,
yeah,
there's a learning curve from the 50 pallet to the 2000. There's a learning curve. And so if you're in business, like you said, doesn't matter what business you're in,
yeah,
what it takes to run the small. And then you guys have expertise in all of it. And you've seen so many other businesses and how they do it. And you have other
yeah.
clients in there. That's a core competency that really I can't. And it's funny, one of the things that's kept us in business is they'll do an analysis and they'll say, we're outsourcing their logistics now, but we're going to bring this in house. And so we set up all these systems for the doing house, and they do it for a couple of years, and they're like, wow, all the numbers we ran, it doesn't really pencil out. We were better off having a third party warehouse. So they'll send it out.
Operations is not surgical. It is not clean. It is not black and white. It is a whole lot of gray, and it's really hard. And you have to manage it. The trucks never stop. Operations never stops, right? You're managing labor whether you want to be or not. I remember taking phone calls on vacation because people weren't showing up, customer orders weren't dropping. If you're not paying attention to it, nobody is, right? So you can find out very quickly how hard um, operations is, but there's a lot of people that have experience in it. Obviously, different levels and varying degrees of success. But if you get the right group or right partner that has done it before, they have huge amounts of knowledge that you can tap into for, effectively the price of a pallet, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah. Yeah.
started doing direct to consumer consulting for some brands, right? Because now all of a sudden I've seen groups go from 200 cases a week to 20,000 cases a week, same brands, right? So when you see it once, twice, 3 times, 5 times, whatever the number is, you start to build that knowledge base, and a lot of it's repeatable. And if you work with somebody that knows where the path is and how it's going, right? You don't have to rediscover the wheel all the time. You just got to get lucky with the right operation partner or really invest the time to find it. And it's worth a lot.
So would you agree it's a lot easier to scale with a third party like you than if you were to go out and get your own warehouse? Because then you'd have to go from 10,000 square feet to 100,000 or whatever it is. And
financially speaking, unless if someone's mom or dad, owned land in Manhattan in the 80s or whatever it is, right? You probably don't have the option to go out and do your own operation, right? It's, $10 million for not a great building.
Right.
So it doesn't mathematically make sense. When you outsource it, you can focus on what you want to do, which is typically being a food company or being a marketing company, right? Those typically in my world go hand in hand, right? You manufacture, relabel, and then you market well. And you find an opportunity within the customer segment. When you do those two things and when you do them successfully, all of a sudden your brand starts to grow. A consultant's going to come to you and say, you should look to bring your supply chain in-house, right? That group doesn't understand that if you bring the operations in, you're saving pennies at the expense of dollars.
Yeah.
Right. So the upside of that dollar isn't very much, right? Like, trying to save 20% on a service that costs $7 doesn't make a lot of sense when you can take that same money, put it into a new customer acquisition that could generate $1,000, right? So it just comes back to where do you want to invest your money? And you have to be really big in order to do your own direct consumer operation in order to make the math work, right? HelloFresh does it. They're the largest in the world. Freshly used to do it, and they are now not operating it. So, you can make it, it can work both ways, but if you do it too soon, you can't cover the operation expenses of a big warehouse if you don't have enough volume. You just always run out of time. You
do. It's some of the mistakes, a lot of when the .com boom happened. I know you were still in kindergarten when when you get in I just got in the business when that happened. And it seemed like people they saw there was going to be this huge demand. So they built giant warehouses with awesome picking systems and everything else like that. But like you said,
so everyone's
capital investment.
Everyone's going through all that stuff right now, right? Because 18 months ago, everyone was under the impression that growth was endless.
Right.
There's only 330 million people in this country.
At some point, there's
right. I mean, and on top of it, people aren't having families of 5 or 6, right? People are having families of 4, right? It's a 1-to-1 replacement now. So it's not like the population can continue to grow. But when everyone went through the pandemic and everyone was like, my sales are quadrupling every week, everyone was like, oh yeah, we'll just do this forever because that mathematically makes sense. And people way overextended. Amazon is a perfect example, right? The largest company in the world, effectively, give or take, maybe somebody else,
right,
is giving away warehouse space, giving it away, right? Cutting leases, reducing square footage, cutting all that stuff back. If they did it, everybody else pretty much did it. Everybody overextended because everyone thought the growth was going to continue. So it's not called the .com bust yet because we still don't have a term for it. Yeah. But the pandemic era definitely ended, and it ended very fast. The party definitely was shut down at 12:01. There's no lingering, no lingering. Now it might start back up, right? That's kind of what everyone's hoping. We go through a little bit of a downturn. Is it 12 months? Is it 24 months? Right? If it's longer than that, there's going to be a lot less direct consumer brands. If it's shorter than that, the ones that survive all of a sudden are going to come out really fast when people have more money to spend because there's going to be less options to buy from. Right. So these 12 months are going to be very interesting for this industry to see where it goes because the American consumer is under so much pressure, more than what the direct consumers industry has ever felt before. So
here's a question I wanted to ask you. What are some of your best, you've seen people grow from 20 cases or 50 cases to 2,000. What are some of the things that are generating the best traction for those clients? And I mean, really more specifically to, your end of the business and the fulfillment, like what are they doing uh, to get traction and results the best one?
So the best brands know exactly who and what they are, right? If you're a fish company, sell the best fish. Don't try to make a fish dog food, right? Just sell the best fish,
Right.
right? Because the groups that do that and they really hone into their core, and if that core offering hits with a client or a customer group, right? They try to become so ingrained with their customers that it's like a part. If they were to shut off that subscription service, it's like a part of their identity is being removed, right? Our customers communicate via text message to their customers, right? Place your order, remind it. You have their phone numbers are saved by their customers, right? It's a really intimate connection that direct consumer companies have. And when you lose that personal touch, you just become another soulless entity that is replaceable, right? That's kind of the difference, right? And the groups that hold that for longer are the ones that are the most successful. Chewy is a prime example. So when they were little, they're the largest UPS or FedEx account in the world. Okay, everybody loves their pets, gigantic.
Yeah.
They used to handwrite thank you cards, handwrite
Wow.
to their customers in the start. Now they were burning cash like crazy, and all of a sudden they IPO'd, and whoever had that business model came out very, very okay.
Right.
But they knew exactly what they were. They were a high-end customer service marketplace that just so happened to serve customers' pets. But they were loved by their customers because of how much they cared, right? Once you lose that, and all of a sudden it becomes ran by some New York investor who's just trying to manage and create as much margin as possible, and you cut out the frills and thrills, all of a sudden you actually don't offer anything, because a product is a commodity, but a relationship is what is really valuable.
Wow. And that's an aha for me, because I don't order a lot of stuff online. Like I will, well, actually, lucky for me, like my wife buys a lot of the stuff I need anyways. But I just think of it as kind of I was thinking more of a cold transaction. Like you go and you click a button and then the next day it shows up. But what you're saying is, in order to differentiate yourself, it's not just click a button. It's a relationship, however, from because they get updates like when it's shipped, right? Or here's your package is going to be there. You ordered yesterday, thank you, and they're staying really intimately service and service.
Yeah, a direct to consumer company will be on your Google Calendar, right? The delivery from Butcher Box or Crowd Cow or whatever it is coming on Thursday. And you know that it's coming on Thursday. So you don't have to worry about protein for the next 2 weeks or whatever the number is, right? When you go to a grocery store, right, it's like a result of all of a sudden being out of food, right? It's not, you're not revolving everything around it, right? It's the results. The direct consumer, you buy with a very clear intention of, I want this product and I'm going to build basically the rest of my meals or my pet's meals around this, right? So it's a commitment back, because it takes time. You got to go in, fill out the credit card information, all that kind of stuff. It's way easier just to swipe the credit card at the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
But when you do it once and all of a sudden you become that brand member, right? It kind of becomes a part of your identity, right? Like, I'm a farmer's dog customer, right? I got the sticker, right?
Yeah.
That's who I am, right? And then all of a sudden you see other people that are like, oh yeah, like I'm a part of that group too, right? It's like a sense of identity, which is very different than just, Costco kind of has it, right? You're a Costco member, right? You feel, you got a card, right? They charge you for it, but you got a card,
And
right?
somehow
So it's
Costco
different.
has it where you go in for a gallon of milk and you come home with a recliner, a hot tub, and a flat screen.
At a million, you would
Doughboy
have to
swimming
buy,
pool.
at a minimum, you would have to buy 4 gallons of milk, right?
Right.
You're not just going to buy one because you got to be ready for the entire apocalypse.
Yeah.
But you have kind of a sense of identity that's attached to that brand, right? Fashion brands do this all the time, right? All of a sudden, you just look at your closet and you're like, oh my God, I have like 8 different things of Lululemon. Like they're all kind of the same product, just different colors. Why? Because it matches with what I do. Matches who I am. I don't know why. All of a sudden, my closet just looks like that. Like it just happens, and then you're identifying yourself as that, right? That's kind of the difference. It's not just a commodity.
Yeah, we have a few apparel accounts, and they are. I mean, they offer returns too. Like that's what you guys don't have a lot of returns, but in the apparel, like we're talking about, there's a whole reverse logistics side because if you have to try something on or if it's shoes or anything, I think they get, I forget what it was, a huge number, like 20% or 30% returns just because people are buying stuff and they have to have that policy.
It's super hard too, because you're trying to build a standardized process for an end consumer. It's not standardized.
Yeah.
Right. So this is kind of how a lot of those groups get around it. Right. You ask for people to go do the returns, and if they do it, great. And if they don't, like you already got paid. You already got paid. Right. Like I need to make it easy enough for you to do it, but I don't want to incentivize you to do it. And the groups that have done that are grappling with that issue. Right. Because not so many, but a lot of groups are defined by the return policy, right? Yeah. Always return it. Always. It's like $10 to return it. So now, not only did you not buy it, I had to give you your money back. So I'm back to zero. And then I actually had to pay you to return something that you didn't like. That's a negative $10 transaction. That is not a good business model.
Yeah.
But, if 20% does it and you factor that into your overall cost of everything, right? You apply additional $1, right, to every order, and you can make the math work. But nobody's going to ship back steaks to the original warehouse. That doesn't work. If you don't like it, that's too bad. Right?
So have you learned from other industries? You're in the food industry. You kind of started are there other operations beside, like apparel is one? Have you learned from other businesses? Then do you think of a specific example that you applied to your operation?
So warehouses really operate very similarly, right? It doesn't, the same solution minus temperature is kind of always like the same solution, right? Like, if one group can automate it, the other group should probably also automate it. The components just might not be correct, right? You might not have enough volume. You might have too many SKUs, right? It doesn't mean that it's not the right answer, but it just might not be the right answer that's actually applicable. So, warehousing boils down to a couple of very, very basic things, right? The inventory control, labor management, right? And the utilization of space, whether that's socks, shoes, steaks, seafood. It's kind of, that part is all kind of the same. So if you see a good operation, like you took me through some of the wine guys.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's
right?
Real similar.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars in product, like in a very small amount of space, very small. If you take a look at how they manage their inventory, right? That's extreme, but it can be applied to our business because their guardrails and their restrictions are so ingrained to that company. If you operate your inventory closer to that, where they have $400 bottles of Camus flying around, right? Then you know that your steak that is $20 is going to be better managed and maintained, right? So you just kind of have to figure out what is the best for each industry when you're going around, to keep an open mind, because everybody is working on kind of the same things. Yeah. It's just a slightly different environment.
Yeah. Full pallets, half pallets, cases, eaches. Yeah. So you can really help people as a consultant. It doesn't matter, even if they're not in the food business, if they have a warehousing question, and I'm going to have your contact information. If you allow us, we're going to put it on the show notes.
Sure.
you're open to field those kind of questions. Do you kind of have like a ideal client that you could help? I mean, obviously you're helping people go from, direct to consumer. Do you have like an ideal client you like to work with? Size, question.
Not, it's probably going to be more of an impact when it's a slightly smaller group, right? When
Right.
it's kind of a startup, right? Kind of a mindset, right? Because then all of a sudden you're working directly with somebody who can actually go out and make decisions. When you're a consultant that's hired in to go into a big operation, right? A lot of times you go in, you make a recommendation, then you leave, and then everybody in that boardroom says, thank God that guy left, right? Because everybody kind of walks into the same situation, right?
Yeah.
You're hired on, and that means that management thinks that the local group isn't doing a great job, and you're going to hire this person who is telling everybody that they are smart and good at this. Whether they are or aren't is to be determined.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden a consultant leaves, and typically none of this stuff gets implemented because nobody actually wants to do it. Right. So it's really hard to walk into a big operation, create some form of a following, and then tell a bunch of people that you're eventually going to leave. This is how you should do it.
So we have some customers. Consultant, I never liked, as a vendor, I don't like working with consultants for that reason. I don't give them, and I shouldn't. I mean, I try to give everybody, the same shake, but there's a stigma, there's a thing in the back of your head. It's like, this guy is just, well, a lot of times for us, they'll use our information. Like a lot of what we do is consulting, and they'll take what we're doing as part of our proposal, and then they'll call it theirs.
My grandpa always said that a consultant is paid to tell you something that you already know.
Yeah. But I think
it seems like a bad idea
us,
in a lot of those situations.
Like, that's why I asked you. It's tough. Like you said, not everybody's a candidate. Like when you were telling that story, reminded me of Pepsi. This was years ago. I did Pepsi. They had a problem. They had 3 different kinds of pallets. They had a 36 by 36 pallet, 48 by 40, and a regular 40/48 GMA. And racking systems, you want everything to be the same. Like you've got all these different. It's a nightmare. And it's like conveyor systems, everything. But what was driving it is that the production was set up for that. So wherever they were making, like they had certain things, like I forget what it was, Mountain Dew or some 2-liter bottles or something. The machine that made it only got fed 36 by 36 because whoever designed it. So I kept telling them for years, 5 years, I'm like, they're like, well, what can we do? What do we need to do? I'm like, well, you need to standardize your pallet. Well, it's not that hard. Everybody else is doing it. And they're like, no, we can't do it. They paid a consultant like $150,000 or something, and then the one thing they told them is standardize the pallets, and then they did it. So, like you said, when it's a big company,
sometimes you just got to hear it from a different person.
Yeah.
Right. Because what will happen is that when you hire a consultant, you're admitting that you need to listen to somebody. That person might just be regurgitating information that's already been told to you. And a lot of times already been told to you by people that are hourly that you don't really want to listen to, right? You don't want to really admit that the supervisor actually knew the whole time what you should actually focus on. Or a vendor that is paid to do something entirely different is telling you to do this one thing that'll help you fix it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of a hard thing. Smaller accounts it's easier to make a big impact, right? You can redesign the SKU mix, for example, right? You can go from 500 SKUs to 350 SKUs, right? And, if they haven't done that type of thought process before, that has a massive ripple effect, right? So going in and trying to knock down the oak door at some gigantic company that doesn't want to get broken into,
right?
It's not very fun, right? Yeah. It's going to be forever project, and all of a sudden you just feel like you're an employee, right? It's not what you want to do, right? Consultants are, at least I am interested in helping provide faster solutions, utilizing the experiences that I have for people that don't have those experiences, right? And you want to do it fast, and you want to solve a lot of problems, and you want to try to help somebody get past that bottleneck. right? Because if you help them get past the bottleneck,
Yeah.
they're probably better than you at the other things.
Right.
Right. And then you give them the chance to scale. And then all of a sudden you have a good you have a good referral, right? You had somebody viewed your work successfully because you help them grow. And that's really all you can try to do and ask for. So
And you become kind of a resident expert in packaging, right? Because you had to share a little bit about that. Like, I don't know much about it, I just know.
So I've packed and shipped like 5 million of these boxes, right? Now I probably packed the most like inaccurately out of all my employees, but I did.
Yeah.
So when you see these things, right, and you see what one company does and another one does, and when you get into an industry, you see that a lot of people are just trying to solve for the same problems, right? There's like 5 things, right, that everyone tries. For us, it's partial spend, the freight spend, right? It's coolant, dry ice, gel pack, right? Inventory management, labor management, and order processing, right? It's all kind of the same thing. But everyone ships everything in a box with installation. There's a one constant. Now it might be different, but everyone does it like the same way. But it's always the same product. It's because there's actually not quite a monopoly, but it's pretty close to a monopoly on the installation side. There was 3 groups, now there's 2 because one bought the other one, right? And there's too much demand and there's not enough capacity, and all of a sudden everyone just gets the same things, right? But it's not custom. It's not different for anybody. It's the exact same. It's like everybody walking around in the exact same white pair of sneakers. You can get a different size, but they're all the same sneaker.
Yeah.
Right? You're shipping something that's completely different than somebody else, but you're going to get the exact same product. They're going to tell you it's different, but it's not. So when you start looking at where these direct-to-consumer companies are going, you need to actually have a custom solution that can be adjustable for everyone. So that's something that we're working on. I'm a part of a group called Little Feet Packaging. We have a product called Polar Pubble, where you could actually toggle the material thickness to address time in transit for your orders. So if I'm shipping boxes to California from California, that's a 1-day transit. So I get to actually utilize the appropriate amount of materials for that order. Now, when a box goes from California to Seattle, it's a different amount of material. It's a 2-day amount of material, right? The competition is effectively applying a one-size-fits-all, and that is to cover the 2-day or 3-day box, right? Our model allows you to toggle back and forth and actually address the need of that individual order, which will help you reduce your cost, right? You don't need like a rocket launcher kind of approach to solve everything. You need to be much more strategic on a per order basis, and that helps you remove cost and just help optimize your overall performance. So when you start to dive into those things that everyone uses as the same, right, there's an opportunity to add some form of disruption. Same way how regional carriers are starting to disrupt the big 2 of FedEx and UPS, right? They cover everything. Now, all of a sudden, regional carriers cover very specific metros at a higher performance and a lower cost, right? So, when it becomes the same and only offering, there is an opportunity for disruption in that industry.
Yeah. You reminded me, and your story parallels. You've met Steve Waller. He's you met him at one of our executive breakfasts. He's the one that reads the paper, and because we were teasing him because he doesn't do the technology. He wants to have the paper.
I remember he brought his paper to breakfast.
Yeah. And he was employee number 6 at DHL. So kind of like you, employee number 5. And they went from 6, I had him on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, 6 employees, I think, to 2,000. And from 1975 to 1980, and Steve opened up all those countries like Greece and like all the Middle East, because like the mail sucked. Like you couldn't get anybody, like there wasn't FedEx, there wasn't. And so he was just going around opening everywhere, and they build DHL in not to, from 200 and 2000. It's just still
not to rain on my parade,
yeah.
but
Yeah. So
it's just another zero.
you'll be at 2000 by the end of the year. I wanted to ask you about pick to light, because that's a technology that you did a lot of research on, and it didn't pencil out and it didn't pencil out. You mind sharing kind of, so pick to light is if you have a shelves and then the lights light up to grab the order. And so you don't have to read a label or anything. You just look, the light lights up and the employee knows, grab one of those and put it in the box. So you were looking at that, I think, for five
Long
years,
time.
right? Long time before you actually did it. So share a little bit about how that process was and how did it finally make sense?
So pick to light has been around for a long time, right?
Yeah.
It hasn't been around for 50 years, but it's been around for 20, right?
20.
Or whatever the number is. For our customer mix, it just never really made sense because we had such a small SKU count, right? So we had like 120 SKUs was kind of always our max. And when you have it set up on the roller rack system, right? If you're getting 6x4, you're getting 24 SKUs in 8 feet, right? So you're only having to walk 50 feet to cover 120 SKUs.
Right.
Right. It's not very far. It's not very complex, right? You can basically look at one set of racking and see all your SKUs. For the customer that we finally did it for, they have 350 active slots, which rotates 500 total SKUs, right? Because you have some that run 1 week, some that run the other week. And they're trying to grow to 1,500 SKUs.
Oh, wow.
So when you start looking at that, when you're looking at basically the equivalent of a grocery store, right? It makes more sense to do it. But when it's kind of a tight sprint of a SKU model, it doesn't make as much sense. So just because it's an optimal solution for picking doesn't mean that that's the optimal solution for you at that time. Because is what pick to light would help us personally solve is going from like 99% accurate in orders, which is just using like human interaction and manual processes, to 99.75, right? Our customers weren't going to pay more for that 3/4 of a point improvement. They weren't going to be like, oh yeah, here's another $1.
Yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden you spent $500,000 to get incrementally better for $0 additional dollars.
Yeah.
Your operation would by definition be better, less flexible, right? Because now you have a rigid system in structured in place, but it definitely would have been better. But that doesn't mean that you're actually going to get any additional money for it, right? This isn't for charity work, right? You have to make sure that the math always pencils out. And when you cannot generate more revenue, then the investment really doesn't make any sense unless if you're looking at the downside of opportunity of losing that account and or business, right? But it never worked because it was always going to slow us down. It was always going to add too much complexity, and I didn't have long enough contracts to really make it work, right? So we finally had a group come in and say, this is what we want to do. We're going to take the risk on it. And, we opened up their doors to kind of let it happen, let it work, but they were the only one that can actually support it from a SKU count. So, if you're going to be having thousands of SKUs, it makes a lot of sense in order to do that. And it's also because it's still set up in the same roller rack structure, right? 1,500 SKUs for us in that model is still only going to be down 120 feet of rack, double-sided, and maybe an additional U-turn, right? So it's like 250 feet that you might be walking. I'm not walking miles in a warehouse, right? So, it has to really fit the model that you're trying to do. And for us, it does. But for a long time, it didn't, even though I looked at it every year. And still didn't make any sense every year.
Yeah.
But then it finally did.
Going to ProMat with you, and it was probably 5 or 6, it was 6 years ago because it's ProMat's coming up in a few weeks. So I got one final question, and I love to ask people this. And I remembered you taught me what a GIF was. I didn't know how to send a GIF. Remember, you sent me a GIF, and then
I sure
I
did.
wasn't able to respond, and I was like, "How do you do that?" And you're like, "Ask your 11-year-old kid." And I actually ended up doing it by accident one time, and then I remember texting you.
You just hit the plus. You just hit that plus button, and all of a
I hit
sudden
the
you
plus.
got.
But what are some technologies that you're using, if you have any, or things you're doing that kind of might be new, or podcasts that you listen to?
So technologies for life or technologies for
Anything.
work?
Yeah, just anything. I'm always curious. Like, we started using Slack,
Oh, yep.
really great way to manage projects for
So
us.
like personally, I've started to use a personal budgeting app called Mint, uh, and it allows you to track everything, right? Because when you're so focused on your work, right, it's sometimes your personal life and expenses become on the back burner, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which for you personally and me personally is probably not the right way to do it, right? So you have to manage it, and it creates a very simple platform. You can always see where you are. You can set personal budgets for yourself, have everything mapped out, and if you're doing a good job or not. Because money doesn't define happiness, but if you don't have any, right, it can be very uncomfortable very fast.
Yeah.
And the world is a very easy place to overspend and do all that kind of stuff, right? So that always keeps me in check. That keeps me in line and in sequence and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of takes the pressure off of me when I have to do it on my own. Right now, all of a sudden, I have like kind of not an accountant, but I have a reference that I'm able to use. So that definitely helps. It makes it a lot easier. You don't have to worry all the time. It's all right there in front of you.
Yeah, you're right. That's great. Yeah. And I focus all this time and effort on the business, like you said, and crunching the numbers and making sure in the financials and everything like that. And then at home, it's like, well, I want to take a break. Right. So it's called Mint, and it's an app, and
Yep.
that's cool. Yeah. I've read that people are selling, I think we talked about this, selling spreadsheets on Etsy, because same kind of thing. Like, you can plug things into a spreadsheet, but this Mint is an app. So we're running out of time. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you if they have a question about warehousing or packaging, installation, anything we've talked about? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I answer my phone all the time. I talk on my phone all the time. So phone number, a phone call or a text message is always easiest for me. If not, I'll say I get to my personal emails kind of towards the end of the day, and I have a very clear habit of making sure that I always clear my inboxes at the end of each day. You got to go through and figure out which ones are important, which ones aren't.
Right.
But I never want to leave anything on unread. That is like a personal goal of mine. So I communicate probably too much on all that stuff, as my wife will tell me. But I'm pretty easy to get a hold of.
Yeah. So it's okay to put your phone number in the show notes, and we'll put your email. And this is awesome.
And if somebody reaches out to me that I don't like, I'll just block them. Like, it's not a big deal. Not a big deal to me.
Yeah, I think you blocked me before, but I was able to.
That was on accident. That was on accident.
Yeah. So, folks, we've been visiting with Matt Burke, warehousing professional, direct-to-consumer fulfillment extraordinaire. Matt, this has been, I've been looking forward to this. It was a lot of fun, a lot of information, educational. Can't wait for my guys to watch this, and can't wait to send it out. Thank you for joining us.
You bet, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the Tao of Pizza podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.